Leaky roofs, broken boilers and blocked loos are a multi-billion-pound business, with more complaints than any other. Tonight, World in Action sets up home to investigate Britain's builders and confront the cowboys.
Just shut up. This is my business here. My business. This is not a criminal offence. That's right. I know that.
In the heart of leafy Surrey, this is the World in Action house. We join forces with Surrey Trading Standards for a special investigation. This summer, dozens of home maintenance firms came here to ply their trade, and sometimes their tricks. Many who pulled into this drive overcharged. Some did unnecessary work. Others perpetrated elaborate cons, producing amazing evidence of the sorry state of a £9 billion British industry. Meet Oliver and Leonie. Oliver's a World in Action journalist, and Leonie is a Surrey Trading Standards officer. And this is to be their new home. But it's no ordinary house. It may look like a 1950s dwelling, but the technology is definitely 1990s. The pictures you're seeing are from hidden cameras, which cover all areas. The kitchen, the garden, even the attic, allowing us to investigate every type of home repair rip-off. Hundreds of thousands complain every year. Many more don't realise they've been conned. But here in the garage, World in Action, building experts, and Surrey Trading Standards can watch and record every move the builders make. We've watched cowboys like DL Roofing Maintenance, who've discovered a new evil lurking in the homes of Surrey.
I don't like working near them, to be honest.
Well, because they're vicious.
Yeah, they do come at you, yeah, especially when they know there's a nest around, you know, they won't leave you alone. But they come from nowhere. You know, they hit a tree and come straight off a tree, straight to the roof at you. And,
take you by surprise, do they?
Yeah, they do, yeah. They nearly caused me one day to come off a roof.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
We'll discover more about that expensive menace later.
Well, we'd like to expose the traders that we know complaints about, or we have complaints about, but we'd also like to be able to see what they actually do when they're in a person's house. What are the cons? And to show everybody else what the cons are.
Usually, there's no way of knowing just what sort of a job a trader's done, but this time it's different. At the start of the summer, the whole World in Action house is checked from top to bottom by a team of experts. Checks complete, and the house gets a clean bill of health. It's nearly time to call in the builders, but not everyone need apply.
We've invited these traders to the house because they're traders we've had complaints about in the past. Some we've had a lot of complaints about, some only 1 or 2 complaints. But what we'd like to see is what they get up to when they don't know they're being filmed.
The next step is to create some jobs for the boys. With the help of our experts, anything that can go wrong will go wrong over the coming weeks. First to go is the boiler. It was thoroughly checked by plumbing expert Colin Topp. Satisfied that the boiler was sound, he then introduced the simplest possible fault. It left Oliver and Leonie with no heating or hot water.
What I found is the wiring to the plug wasn't very good anyway, so I've just put in a blown fuse, which is likely to happen because of the wiring to the plug is in such poor condition.
So, what would our hand-picked plumbers make of this tiny fault? First to call were 00001A AA Assistance Limited.
No idea, I can tell you. But I
Within minutes, Tony the plumber had made the first costly decision.
How about your phone, sir?
Yeah, I'll help myself, so. It's just that.
This job was too much for one man. He calls for reinforcements.
Is it possible you can come over here and have a look at this job? Please. Yeah, it's more of an electrical fault than a heating problem.
Sean, the electrical expert, duly arrived.
So, how long do you think it'll take? Sure. Sorry to bother you guys.
Yeah.
3 to 4 hours, somewhere around there approximately. By the time we drained it all down and flushed it out.
Really?
You can't just get a new pump in on the old system. You're basically...
They thought it was to be a big job. We needed a new pump, and the whole system had to be drained down. As Oliver and Leonie set off for a much-needed trip to the bank, the two repairmen went missing. We'd lost them. In the garage, we frantically scanned every camera. 7 minutes ticked by. Then, loud thuds from the back garden gave the game away. Fantasy plumbing, real football. At £58 an hour, it's not quite Premier League wages, but it's not bad. Game over, and eventually the plumbing pair go back to change the pump. But as our expert later showed, this was another waste of time.
I checked the pump before the contractors arrived and it was working. After it had been removed, I took it away and tested it, and it's in full working order.
Remember, before Oliver and Leonie had left, Sean had said that draining down the system was one of the reasons the job would take so long.
3 to 4 hours, somewhere around there approximately. By the time we drained it all down and flushed it out.
That was a good intention that drained away.
We drained it down?
Nah, too much hassle.
Not bad.
When Tony and then Sean finally left, we were £305 worse off. But they did change the blown fuse. Another day, another plumber, and a different diagnosis. The man from Alliance Maintenance Limited fixed the fuse, then insisted the real problem was that we needed a new timer.
This one's replacing, it's on its way out. What I've done for you now, look, see, everything's on.
Yeah.
Might last a day, an hour, a week, a month, a year. It's
It needs replacing.
absolutely, that one's replacing very, very shortly.
In the garage, Colin Topp was surprised by this news. He'd thoroughly checked the timer, and there was nothing wrong with it. Plumber number 3.
Plumber? Yeah. Oh, lovely. Come in.
He went one better and condemned the whole boiler. He fixed the fuse, then delivered his drastic diagnosis, having spent less than 3 minutes examining the boiler.
It's leaking on the heat exchanger. You can smell the thermal or the inhibitor inside leaking onto it.
So what's that mean?
It's condemned and turned off, I'm afraid.
Taking his warning at face value could have cost us £1,000 for a new boiler.
What's he done with this, Colin?
He's condemned the boiler as being unsafe and issued a warning notice, which is the proper thing to do if you're in any doubt, although the boiler isn't unsafe. But he's also said that the appliance has been turned off and labelled. Although there was a label, the boiler has been left switched on, and so if it was dangerous, it could continue being used.
A new pump, a condemned timer, a condemned boiler. And all we really needed was a 5-amp fuse.
Someone coming in, mending what was a blown fuse, you know, it's probably not even a 5-minute job, but be able to string that job out for 2 or 3 hours and fit a pump where a pump wasn't needed. Well, you know, I think the pictures speak louder than words, don't they, really?
And then if this is happening to us, we're aware of these situations. Oh, we've got it on film, but the average householder hasn't got those facilities. They don't know what's going on, and they never ever will.
Is he going to reach the bill?
Oliver parted with £53 to Alliance Maintenance Limited. They told us we needed to spend a further £120 on a new timer, when we didn't.
It hasn't just happened within a month. It's been like, well, which bit has
To
been-
RJ Plumbing and Heating, who condemned the boiler, we handed over £79. They stand by their engineer's decision to condemn the boiler and said it was a genuine mistake that they'd left it switched on.
Yeah, because there's something they should have pointed out.
But star billing has to go to Tony and Sean of 0000001A AA Assistance Limited. They charged over £300, more than 10 times what the job should have cost.
300.
For years, official reports have demanded action over Cowboy traders. Yet hundreds of thousands of us continue to complain about so-called home improvements, more than complain about used cars. Much has been written, but little has been done. If it's hard to see what goes on in your boiler, it's even harder with the roof. Before we could call in the roofers, we called in Roy Ilott, a surveyor of 25 years standing.
So what are you looking for here, Roy?
To see whether the timbers are sound, to see whether the roof is well constructed, and see whether there's any signs of water penetration.
And what's your verdict on this one?
No problems so far. It looks all sound and okay.
In fact, our roof was so sound, Roy had to use a crowbar to lift off a tile to give us an excuse to call in the roofers.
One of the problems we had was deciding which roofers to invite round because we had so many to choose from. They're a big problem, not only for Surrey, but all over the country.
We plumped for DL roofing maintenance. On a wet Thursday morning, David Lee arrived to start work. He hadn't been on the job very long when Mr. Lee appeared to have discovered something rather alarming. What had started as a broken tile was now obviously much more serious.
I don't want to frighten you or anything, but you've got a squirrel.
I've got a
nest.
squirrel in there.
There's a nest.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'll tell you where it is.
Whereabouts?
Whoever put the aerial up,
Yeah.
right, there's a lot of broken tiles there and they're going underneath the flashing,
Right.
behind the chimney.
Right.
Right, this is what's been causing the problem because...
What, a squirrel?
Squirrel. Yeah, it's been running round
Oh,
all the time we've been here, but it's gone away for a while and let's hope we keep away. I'm not trying to make it work or anything
No,
because
no,
what it is, they can be a bit
Well,
nasty.
they north through
They go
things,
for the
don't
electric wires and everything. And if they've got nest up there and there is young in there, then it's hard work getting them out because they will come at you, you see. So.
What, they're vicious, are they, as well?
Yeah.
What, squirrel, really? Oh, gosh.
They just go for you, you know.
This came as news to us in the garage. We'd been watching the house intently and hadn't spotted a single squirrel anywhere near the roof. We were finally convinced Mr. Lee was lying when we saw him planting evidence. While David Lee was busy on the back roof, at the front, his mate was busy preparing something. Watch the yellow bag. It's in the bucket. That yellow bag again. Now it's on the roof. He's tipping out a homemade nest. Leonie was taken to the back garden and shown a squirrel's nest.
You know, but to look at it, you think, right, it's a bird's nest. And when you look into it, you know all the chewy bits.
You
Yeah.
can recognise it, can you?
Oh, yeah.
With the squirrel problem contained, DL Roofing at last turned their attention to the only job that needed doing, the job they'd been called in to do, fixing the broken tile. As his mate botched this job, Mr. Lee warned Leonie about the dangers of cowboy roofers.
There's some funny blokes out there working.
What,
you know.
some real cowboys?
Yeah. These door knockers, when you get them looking for work, they're the ones what mainly we're called out behind. They cat chimney stacks over.
What, you have to
gas
repair the work they've done?
That's right, yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, when they realise that they've been, you know, conned into things, like they do more damage than the actual putting the job right, you know.
Really?
Another day, another nest. This time, the squirrels have moved inside the roof, or so Mr. Lee would have us believe. We watched him pick up odds and ends in the attic and fashion them into further squirrel evidence.
Shut that, yeah. Okay.
Hi.
That's the signs where they've been nibbling.
All right.
So,
Oh, really?
yeah, they've been inside.
Before Mr. Lee left, he told us he was putting anti-squirrel spray on the back roof. The only spraying we saw was in the front garden. After Mr. Lee left, we were £500 poorer. Most of the money spent on fighting the non-existent enemy. We invited Mr. Lee back for another look at the World in Action roof. Once again, we were filming, but this time he was more than aware of the cameras.
Do you recognise this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is it?
Do I recognise this?
Yes. This is
You
the
tell me.
squirrel's nest that you told us you'd found in that roof. How did it get there, Mr. Lee?
But that's not a squirrel's nest.
It's the squirrel's nest that you told us you'd found in that
That
roof.
is not the squirrel's nest I took out.
It is the squirrel's nest
It's
that you
not.
took out.
It's not.
And we not only saw you take it out, but we saw you put it there in the first place.
Did you?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Oh,
What do you have to say to that, Mr. Lee?
I haven't done anything wrong, have I? I'm talking about my business
You
here.
charge £500.
Why can't you go around
here.
and catch all the cowboys what is around?
But you
Why can't you do that?
You described
Why
how...
can't you go to different people what is doing this for a living? This is my living.
Aren't you a cowboy, Mr.
I'm
Lee?
no cowboy.
Squirrels aren't the only animals Mr. Lee works with. This is the roof of Pauline Purchaser's house, setting for another episode of David Lee's Animal Magic.
He went up into the loft. He insisted on going up to make sure that no water had come in, so he said. And he came down a minute or two later and said he was very sorry. He hated to have to break bad news to me, but that I'd got an infestation in the loft, and he showed me a handful of maggots. I nearly had a fit. I said, well, what are they and where have they come from? He said, well, they are the maggots from horned beetles. And he said, I hate to tell you this, but they're going to do the most terrible damage to the roof. In fact, they could cause the roof and the rafters to fall in. And he said, leave it to me. He could deal with them. He would get rid of them. He got the stuff to spray it with, and he would do it. He came 6 times in just over a fortnight, saying he was using stronger stuff and more expensive each time and getting larger sums of money.
So, had Mr. Lee saved Pauline from the perils of horned beetle? We conducted a maggot identity parade at the laboratories of Rentokil, with a full lineup of the usual suspects from British roofs.
That's the one.
When Pauline looked at the identity parade, she actually pointed to and picked out what were actually bluebottle maggots or larvae. Unfortunately, they're coloured red, which bluebottle maggots aren't, they're white. So these have been treated somewhat, probably in an angling shop for anglers to actually attract fish.
For the imaginary spraying to get rid of fishing maggots he'd put there in the first place, and some other botched work, David Lee charged Mrs. Purchase £11,400.
I'd been nursing my husband. He'd only been dead 2 or 3 months. People who'd known me in the past would just have said, Pauline con by a man like that? I don't believe it. But I was in such a low state that he could con, and he was so plausible.
Did you do any useful work at Mrs. Purchase's house?
What, that?
You charged her more than £11,000 to remove these from her roof. £11,000 from a recently bereaved woman.
Did she?
What do you have to say about that?
Well, let me have a chat to her then.
You can
And it
talk
was
to us
definitely
about
me?
it. Yes, it was definitely
maggots?
you. DL Roofing, that's you, isn't it?
That's right, but with maggots.
Yes, they were maggots, but you told her they were horned beetle larvae.
No, I don't.
You did. You did, Mr. Lee.
No way at all.
Surrey Trading Standards have known about Mr. Lee's antics for some time, but they can't tell us just how many others have complained about him. The fact is, there's very little they can tell the public about sole traders.
One of the most frustrating elements of our job was when consumers phone in and they say, tell us about his trader, is it okay for us to use him? And our hands are tied. Under the Data Protection Act, we cannot divulge any information about that trader. So despite the fact we know that person is out day in, day out ripping people off, we can't say, no, don't use him.
The man in the shorts is Albert Green. He raced around to the World in Action house when we asked him to give us a quote for work on the roof. At the same time, elsewhere in Surrey, another customer was desperately seeking Mr. Green.
Dear Mr. Green, I'm awfully sorry to trouble you after your heart attack, but you appear to have forgotten that you left a pile of slates against the side of the house. As a result, rain is getting into the roof very badly. I'm getting very worried in case part of my landing ceiling comes down.
Well, he sent his wife along to say that he'd had a heart attack and that this is what was preventing him from returning to complete the work, leaving the roof bare and allowing rain to get in.
Just weeks later, there was little sign of any cardiac problems when Mr. Green touted for work at the World in Action house. We declined his offer. The price was too high. The elderly widow who lives under this roof paid a hefty price for trusting Mr. Green. He'd been called in to overhaul the roof. Bit by bit, over 6 months, he extracted her life savings, more than £20,000. And for what? Our surveyor found that Mr. Green's work was nothing more than a few bits of softwood tacked here and there for no apparent reason.
I've been doing the surveys and looking at roofs since the early 70s, and I've never seen anything as poorly done as this.
How much is the work worth?
Well, it's not worth anything because it didn't need to be done in the first place, and what has been done is so poor and shoddy that it actually needs to be taken out again.
The elderly householder's son can't believe his mother paid so much for so little.
My feelings towards Mr. Green are less than charitable, largely because she was so recently bereaved, only beginning of last year. And it's very shortly after that he started to prey on her. And I think that's my own feeling, is very much what he's done. He's literally preyed on her.
For months, Mr. Green has ignored the elderly widow's pleas. She'd like to think it's because he's too ill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Green. You're looking remarkably well. Have you recovered from your heart attack? We've heard from the family of a lady in Surrey. You claim to be too ill to go and finish the job.
Maybe he'd be happier to discuss his firm's special rates for pensioners.
This is the number we phoned. You took more than £20,000 from a recently bereaved woman. We've had an expert look at the work that you did. He said it's the worst job he's seen in 30 years. Have you nothing to say to that woman, Mr. Green?
Kiss my ass.
A woman who just lost her husband, but who could ill afford to lose the money.
What a shame.
Next week, in the second part of our special investigation, the rest of the World in Action house comes under attack from yet more cowboys, including the plumber who turned our water supply into a toxic cocktail. He's holding filthy waste from the central heating system. The large tank is the water supply you use to clean your teeth.
You can see part 2 of this World in Action investigation at the same time, 8 o'clock next Monday.